So, hey guys, today we're going to be doing a little bit of deck building. And today I thought, why not build Kashtira, but full power Kashtira? So we're going to exit out of here, then it should be this list. Okay, let's make a copy. And alright. So, full power Kashtira, well, I haven't really built it before, but it's kind of awkward. So, first off, now you don't actually have to run Kashtira preparations. So, well, actually not Kashtira preparations. It's actually Kashtira Big Bang that you don't have to run. And technically, I guess you don't have to run prep as well. But the thing about the current Kashtira builds where you run Big Bang is because you have one copy of Fenrir. So a basic combo you would have been able to do before is, let's say we start with Special Summon Fenrir, right? And then we would add Rise Heart. Rise Heart special summons itself, and then it'll banish, like, literally whatever. Maybe we'll banish Upbirth. Maybe we banish anything, really. It doesn't super matter. Then we go ahead and make Kashtira Shangri-Ira pass. And then we special summon back Kashtira Fenrir. And that is the turn. You know, that is the combo. Very, very epic indeed. But if we took away the Kashtira support, right? So in this case, it would be Theosis and a Rise Heart. What we literally end on instead would be like Kashtira Shangri-Ira having to special summon Kashtira Ogre or Tier Kash. And that's essentially after the hits they did to Kashtira. This is like the impact of Fenrir being at 1. But now that we can have at least 2 again, you know, not assuming we'll 100% go with 3 Fenrir. I mean, there are benefits and demerits to both, but with Kashtira, you have so many weird jank issues. So we'll at least take away the hand traps first, I guess, and then we'll adjust accordingly. So take out all of the non-engine. And okay, this is what we are left with. So around half of my deck currently is basically engine. I guess we can get rid of Ascendant of Thunder now. So we have the option to cut cards, but okay, here are some just issues with if I cut some cards. So if I cut Tearlaman's Kashtira, there actually is a small problem with deck out. If I am against a 60 card deck that just sits on Chaos Angel, well, not Chaos Angel is actually outable. But if they sit on something really annoying, or for some reason I just cannot end the game, maybe they have a towers that I literally cannot out, like a 3.5k towers, sure. Then if I have no tier cash, my only, well, in archetype way to deal with this would be to just loop Kashtira Rise Heart. So now the issue with Kashtira Rise Heart is I need to get access to Kashtira Rise Heart and I need a target to banish. So as you can see here, during the main phase, if this card was normal or special summon this turn, banish any Kashtira card from your deck, and then you banish the 3 cards from your opponent's deck face down, and you win via deck out. But, well, you know, problem. What if I don't have cards to banish? Then I can't banish their cards. So there's that risk. And also, Tier Cash is just in general kind of useful for scouting out your opponent's deck sometimes. So I'm a fan of Tier Cash, so I think we'll keep it until further notice. Maybe if there was some adjustment we could make to the extra deck that makes this issue not that big of a deal. But yeah, the other thing is Scareclaw Kashtira. This actually plays around a lot of things as well. And it's not that bad of a card in comparison to kind of Kashtira Ogre. Like Kashtira Ogre plus Unicorn is completely useless, but if we have Kashtira Unicorn plus Scareclaw Cash, that's going to be a little bit better, and we're able to translate that into a Shangri-Ira for Fenrir, and then potentially get into more Kashtira stuff. So it's a little bit better situationally. But I would say in most cases you would probably enjoy having a Scareclaw Cash over like a Kashtira Ogre. So maybe your hand is like, I guess, Kashtira Ogre Kashtira Unicorn, and then Rise Heart. So Ogre does absolutely nothing here. But if we were to trade out Ogre for Scareclaw Cash, this would be able to then just make the Rise Heart, which you wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. So we're going to assume the exact line is something like Kashtira Unicorn adds Theosis, and then this gets ashed because they're playing around if we have two of them. So yeah, there's that, and then also Kashtira Rise Heart banishing a card, and then Scareclaw Cash banishing the Theosis, allowing us to add whatever Kashtira card we want. So in this case, it could be Kashtira Birth, it could be Big Bang, just whatever we want. I guess Birth for follow-up is not bad, so maybe you could go with that. But when we start looking at the cards like this, it actually becomes really annoying to build Kashtira, in my opinion. And it would take like a good amount of calcing. So I think the first no-brainer is to go with 3 Unicorn for sure. And then Kashtira Ogre is simultaneously like one of your best cards and worst cards. It's situationally one of your best cards. In certain game states, Kashtira Ogre prevents your opponent from playing the game at all. So if we have some sort of floodgate like deck lockdown or fissure macro in tandem with Kashtira Ogre, it's actually just like brutality. I don't know how else to put it. So Kashtira Ogre by itself can already significantly change certain matchups if he hits, and by that I mean we can banish Chundra off the top, we can banish Lovely just off the top. There are some one-ofs like also I guess Snake Eye Flambridge Dragon, and for Fire King there is Avatar Garunix, I believe, that Kashtira Ogre could just randomly banish off the top and make your opponent's grind game or deck considerably worse or straight up unplayable, depending on like what they're playing, how many of that card they're playing. Like, I don't know, Grand Infusion, which is also at 1. You could just randomly banish that off the top of Ogre. So that could be insanely cracked. Or it could be a brick in your hand that you can't do anything with, where it's not really a starter, not an extender. So if you were to start off with special summoning Ogre, you would need to open specifically Birth, which sucks. But there's the benefit that this is a cash name, and there are some 2-card combos that kind of work with Ogre. So we have Rise Heart Ogre, and we have Kashtira Theosis with Ogre, or pretty much any cash aside from these two, plus Theosis is also combo. So the next thing, I guess, Raitsoth is pretty good, but also kind of bad. So in the sense where it's bad, like in an ideal world, I think I would only want to play 2 Raitsoth, and the reason being, this is a field spell, and well, it says you can only activate 1 pressured planet Raitsoth per turn, so it's technically fine. If someone were to like Baron negate Raitsoth, you could activate the second one from hand. But if you were to get hit by an Ash Blossom Joe Spring, well, then you're not really able to do much with Raitsoth. So there's that. And then Kashtira Birth, for example, is completely useless if you do not have any Kashtira monsters. Same with Theosis, so they're simultaneously good and bad to open. So that also sucks. And then we have Kashtira Big Bang and Kashtira Preparations, which likewise are also terrible if you do not open any Kashtira monsters. So if we do increase the amount of Kashtira monsters we do play, the other downside now is that can we fit in enough non-engine? Like, I don't know. Can we? That's going to be rough. So Kashtira, because of how like they work, you require a decent amount of Kashtira cards or certain Kashtira cards, otherwise it just doesn't work. So for now we'll just do but we'll throw in a bunch of relatively useless cards. So we'll throw in a bunch of vanillas for the time being and do some test hands with just the current build. So the consistency should be a little bit better than normal, but alright, here we go. Kashtira Unicorn, special summon. activate Theosis. And then here, Kashtira Ogre plus Birth. That does absolutely nothing, right? And we have almost maxed out starters. The only thing we don't have is one extra copy of Fenrir, which I guess we could just throw in now. But with only 2 copies of, well, with 3 copies of Fenrir, 3 copies of Unicorn, we didn't see any of them with Birth. So in terms of cards that would be good with the Birth here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then if we played the extra Fenrir, that'd be 11. And if you count Tier Cash, which could randomly mill a useful tier name off the top, or not tier name, cash name off the top, just randomly, maybe. It's kind of dicey. I wouldn't really count Tier Cash for it, but I mean, there's an opportunity for something with Tier Cash with Birth. So that's a bit awkward. And also, preparations is not as good if you don't have like a fissure. So if I were to have fissure plus preparations, if I summon a Rysart and I get nibbed, I can summon a Rysart back because it gets banished instead of sent to the graveyard. And also you can banish cards with Scareclaw Cash and also Tier Cash, which actually adds on to your grind game a little bit. So it's really not that simple. There's sacrifices you have to make everywhere. Like every single action has like, I guess you could say, an equal and opposite reaction of some sort, you know? Like you gain this, but you lose this. You lose this, but you gain that. Every single little thing can affect Cash kind of negatively, and Cash hands, you can just generate pretty terrible ones. So in this hand, for example, it can get the job done, right? But you also have to take into account, wait, I have an opponent? Okay, look, someone does Ash Blossom Joe Spring on this, then all we can do at best is Shangri-La Pass here. And also keep in mind that I did put in 3 rates off and I just haven't seen it. So, you know, that sucks. The consistency for Kashtira is actually not as high as some other decks that have come out recently, like, namely, we'll say Blue Eyes, well, Centurion's kinda new, Punk with their support. Punk is like leagues more consistent than this. Yubel, and here we can clearly see the suffering going on. And here, as you can see, somehow we only opened, despite half of our deck being Kashtira cards, just actually more than half, we only opened 1 rates off. So if we get ashed or impermed here, we're not extending. Just all right, cool. And then here, if Unicorn gets impermed or something like that, but we're not extending with this hand either. Here with this hand, if Unicorn gets impermed, we have no access to the Ogre or Fenrir, but like having the Fenrir is like alright, because we could like Birth and then normal summon Fenrir. Fenrir adds Rysart, special summon Rysart, and then we can go from there. Well, that is assuming the Unicorn gets the resolve, and our opponent does not have any way to interrupt this. Well, I don't feel like that's super likely. Finally, a good hand, we have Birth, Unicorn, and then rates off. So here we can do special summon Unicorn first, activate Birth, I think, and then special summon Ogre, try to activate or add Theosis with Unicorn, and then try resolve Theosis maybe, and then we have rates off for Rysart. If our opponent drops any monster hand trap on us during this period of time, we'll be able to activate both Ogre and Unicorn, and even if one of these 2 were to get impermed, the other will still resolve, giving us valuable information and also being able to manipulate what our opponent can do somewhat. So in which case, with Kashtira Ogre, we could force them to take a dead draw, like an Ash Blossom Joy Spring for next turn. For Unicorn, we could do something like banish Sequence, or we could banish Requiem. So there's that, right? But well, if we're looking at just Kashtira, purely Kashtira, even if you were to unlimit all of the cards, somehow, Kashtira kind of still sucks. Like, somehow I'm still not really opening super good hands here. It's crazy, right? But, of course, we can't unlimit Kashtira because of the decks that can just abuse Kashtira. That, as odd as that sounds, that the decks that abuse the Kashtira monsters, it's not Kashtira itself. It's kind of funny if you think about that, actually. But alright. Even if we do increase Fenrir by 1, it's not going to really change much. Like, yeah. Crazy hand here. We have Scareclaw Cash, and yeah, I don't even want to talk about that hand. Double Fenrir plus double Birth. Terrible. Fenrir plus Kashtira Rise Art. Also terrible. I don't think there's a single good target to add off of Fenrir here, unless you want to try making Vuska. So we could Rise Art for Rise Art, normal Stone Rise Art, Special Stone Rise Art, and then make Baguska, I guess. And then after that, we still don't really have a play with the Fenrir. I guess if our opponent were to Imperm our Rise Art and we get like a Banish for something, I think Banish for what though? Maybe Birth? And then would we still have to top deck something? We might actually. Horrible. And then this hand. We can't really do anything with this. Despite like Tier Cash being technically kind of an extender, and then Kashtira Unicorn being a starter. Well, now that you look at it again, right? How many of these cards in this deck are genuinely just one card starters? Well, we have just Unicorn. So at best we have the D6. And then everything else is a 2 card. So that sucks. And then also worth mentioning is Pressured Planet Race Off is kind of simultaneously a good card and a bad card. It just really sucks. So the issue with the rates off is that this incentivizes you to do the line where you go like special summon Shangri-Ira, then you activate Rise Heart to trigger Shangri-Ira, and then you can convert Rise Heart into a Rise Heart. But if you summon Shangri-Ira plus Rise Heart on the same turn, that's 2 special summons from the extra deck, allowing your opponent to then go into Typhon. And then Typhon is able to destroy Fenrir by battle, spin back a Rise Heart. And it's in general just not that great. So just giving your opponent that option is not something I'd be super happy about. And depending on like situation, there is also the idea of leaving the Arise Heart actually and just spinning back the Shangri-Ira so there's no follow-up and you only have to deal with potentially a Rise Heart next turn. Or maybe a multiple material Zeus. So it's not like that simple, but alright. Let's take all these out. Okay. So even with like 25 cards that are just purely engine, we can draw horrible, horrible dead hands. So Kashtira, clearly still like more or less a terrible deck, but alright. What can we do to kind of help out Kash here a little bit? Well, in terms of engine, I think we can't fit in that much more because this is about all of the archetypal engine you can just play for this. So I guess all we can do now is maybe put reinforcement of the army in. But like if we have too many Rise Art, that's not necessarily good either. So that just sucks. So what now? Well, we put in essentially all of the good Kashtira cards. So not much we can do here. In terms of my extra deck, I probably wouldn't change much. Yeah, not a whole lot to do here. I guess the only thing that I would consider changing now is maybe removing Chengying. That's probably about it, honestly. But, what else do we have? Well, in terms of engine, I think this is pretty capped out unless we want to slot in something like Ascendant of Thunder or Fog King. There's really nothing else to put in. So what you're left with now is probably just non-engine. So we'll put back in the non-engine I took out initially somewhat. So we don't actually need Called By. That's actually just something you genuinely do not need. So we'll go ahead and see if it's still around. And nope, don't see the hand traps. We'll have to search them all. All right, Edge Blossom, still generically useful, I suppose, and it works under either Shifter or Arise Art, so that's what we're going with. And then Ghost Bell is not bad because we can get Bell plus Shifter, and then Bell will cover for the Shifter. There is that possibility, but not something absolutely necessary because not so good under like a Shifter. So we'll go with Ghost Mourner now. Mourner, decent. We could play 2 to 3 Mourner. Imperm, definitely a card we should play at 3 in this deck. And now for non-engine, what does that put us at? 5, 6, 9. I want to run probably at least 3 more cards then of just some sort. So we can't play either of the Dominus cards here because our attributes are literally all over the place. I think we have every single attribute in the game pretty much, aside from Light being played in Kashtira. Yeah. What is that, like 5 out of 7 or something? Pretty annoying in this regard, but okay. What next? In terms of hand traps, I guess like you could technically resolve Bell in some cases because like weird cards, I guess, that add from either the graveyard or the deck. Like I believe it was called Heavy Metal Raiders or something. Whatever it was, it's the new Melmorph support card. The spell that does the search that can be belled. So that's a bit weird, I guess, but it's something you can do. We want ideally something that can activate under Shifter or Arise Art. That would be the ideal. So I guess we'll go with Ghost Bell, and then we'll just throw in 2 Bell. Well, Bell's usefulness depends on the meta, so but we could change out some of these hand traps depending on like the exact meta we're playing in. But alright. Now we still have 3 slots. I guess the logical answer is to just slap in 3 Fissure to me. And we could just be content with this. And what has this changed? This just made Kashtira just slightly more consistent. And now looking at the quality of our hands, we see the same issue again where Unicorn plus Ogre are terrible together. And they don't really do anything because we have to search Theosis to get into a Rise Art. But I mean, it's kind of okay because we have Fissure here, so we still have some macro-like effect. So not like absolutely terrible if we just grab Birth, normal summon Ogre. Except we don't have any access to the other Kashtira monsters quite yet, but I guess we could get into them by going into Shankar Era. And we can actually do Ogre grab Big Bang instead of Prep. So if we have Big Bang, we can special summon like Fenrir, banish that Fenrir off of the Big Bang. And that's not absolutely terrible, or we can just keep the Fenrir and banish the Shankar Era. Depends, but yeah, we also have follow-up with Birth on the next turn if we do that, so it's not like genuinely terrible. Here we have special summon Ogre, activate Fissure, Theosis effect on Ogre. Maybe not in that exact sequence, but you know, general idea, right? So we have all that. Seems fine. Even if this doesn't resolve, we will have to draw another Cash monster, but we will have Baron plus a Kashtira Ogre on a follow-up turn. Or actually, that's the immediate next turn. Assuming Prep resolves, then I can do normal summon Ash, make Baron, bring back Ogre with Prep if I am allowed to search, even if I get Ashed on this. And then we have that combo. Simply because we open Fissure. So that's fine. And then dead, dead, live, live, live. This is only going to be live if we go into Kashtira Unicorn, which I guess we might, off of Theosis. But then that makes this one dead. But this requires this to resolve to happen. Otherwise, if the Theosis does not resolve, we really get nowhere with this hand. So it dies to like 1 interrupt. Yeah. And then here, hand's like just dead. We don't have a floodgate or anything either. Complete brick. Okay, next. Dupe, dupe. Dead, dead. This plus this doesn't do anything either. Firepoint just hand traps on the Theosis here. Like, this gets denied for whatever reason. The biggest play we can do is something like Baguska or Shankar-Ira. And then this is really hard to stop because you can't Ghost Ogre the Birth either. The only thing you could hit me with here is Impulse, I believe. Dominus Impulse. So the Fissure here will protect the Birth. And then Kashtira Rise Heart plus Birth allows me to go into Unicorn, then into Fenrir. Because of how we sequence it, kind of depends. Since we don't need to normal summon Rise Heart actually, because we have Kashtira Ogre, we could technically go Fenrir for Unicorn. But it's better to go Unicorn for Fenrir because Fenrir can then search something else, I think. Well, actually, no, it doesn't matter because Unicorn searches Theosis, which can go into like any Kashtira at this point. So it's like about the same actually. It doesn't matter. Genuinely should be fine. We don't have a target to add back for Theosis though. But you know, it is what it is, and that's perfectly acceptable by me. Alright. Let's go next card. Or next hand. And well, this Birth saves the sand, otherwise it's just miserable. And also, I forgot to mention this, but what if we spin some of these hands and look at them from going second perspective? Now we have to beat our opponent with just Birth, Ogre, Fenrir, Fissure. This is what we have to use to beat up like some kind of board. Like, how do I beat how do I beat a U-Bell end board with this? You don't. Didn't open a hand trap. Yeah, it's not happening. And then this one, yeah, this one's okay for both. This one is kind of okay for both. Unless we don't draw a Kashtira monster, that could be problematic. And here's the problem, yeah. If this gets hand trapped now and then we lose the Rise Heart, we have actually no play. How many turns do we have no play for? It's till here because Birth can bring back Rise Heart. So it's not the end of the world. It's just pretty terrible though. And then here, yeah, okay. We don't have much of anything unless we get to resolve the rates off here. If we do though, we can at least make Rise Heart, but these two cards in hand are going to be pretty much just completely dead, right? Actually, no. Wait. The Tear Cache is actually useful in this hand, but the Ogre is 100% dead. So what we can do with this Tear Cache is, if we do the Shankar-Ira line with the Rise Heart, we can stock materials onto that Rise Heart by using Tear Cache. So it's at three mats. So that's somewhat useful. But it's not like super useful, if that makes sense, because it's not like an extender. It's very much win more in that scenario. And then here, well, I mean, you're really not doing much if this Unicorn doesn't resolve. That's about all I can say about that hand, right? And then this hand, same thing. Unicorn doesn't resolve, not much is going to happen. And yeah, that's just the misery of playing Kashtira. The deck has anti-synergy with itself, like just out the wazoo. Like, you have some good cards, like you have Kashtira Unicorn, that's good. Kashtira Theosis, that's also good. Kashtira Birth, that's also good. But they're only like situationally good. It's like saying something like, damn, did I open like Wishes plus Maiden instead of Wishes plus Sage with Eyes of Blue? Hand literally is unplayable. I have to activate Wishes and hope it doesn't get ashed, or I can't play. It's same energy as that. I mean, that's not how these cards work, but that'd be how Kashtira works, you know? It's like just kind of terrible, somewhat. Like as a deck, it just doesn't function that great. But also, no one really wants to give Kashtira support because, yes. So Yeah, I think I might revisit this at some point, but I don't really see what you could do that would be like tremendously useful to Kashtira if you literally unbanned all of their cards. Well, yeah, kind of sucks this deck, huh? So yeah, that's all I got for you guys today, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.